we're not able to do an eligibility test before handing someone benefit. First of all, it's our money. Secondly, it was in our manifesto that we were going to bring in these sorts of changes. It's simply outrageous that unelected officials in Brussels can prevent us from bringing about the reforms that we said we were going to do when we were voted into office.
The EU Commission is refusing to speak to us, but it hasn't been shy in issuing Britain with an ultimatum. It says the right to reside test, what foreigners must pass to claim benefits here, is too tough. And it's given the government until the end of this month to change that. Otherwise, it'll sue. But Britain's refusing to budge. Otherwise, it claims it'll have to pay out £2.5 billion to those who won't put anything back in the pot.
The British welfare state exists to benefit British people. This was very clear in the original welfare state back in the 1940s, which had a contributory principle. You contributed and you benefited. If you didn't contribute, you weren't eligible.
40% are migrants from Eastern and Central Europe. Most of those aren't eligible for welfare. Already some are trying their luck, and no doubt more will if the UK's forced to sweeten their deal. Ivor Bennett, RT, London.
All right, let's turn it over to Dimitri. He joins us next now with the business news.
Thanks, Rory. Russia will become one of the world's 5 biggest economies if the government's objectives are achieved. Prime Minister Vladimir Putin has set a target of boosting the country's gross domestic product to 7% growth a year and significantly improving labor capacity. He hopes to reach this by changing the structure of Russia's economy.
Our ambitious goals can only be achieved within the framework of a new model of economic growth. Instead of raw materials, we should count